parts. There's very little red now. Red has declined to zero nearly. Red is very poor. So this water framework directive that's coming in 2027, that's what's driving this issue, and in that directive all water bodies have at least good status, so all water bodies have to turn to green. So that's what's driving this. We don't think any country in Europe is going to achieve that. Ireland as a whole would be well up on the top of the league on water quality in general. Our standard of drinking water is way under the limit, is only 2 or 3% of it anywhere near the limit in the country. So that's what's driving this thing.
And that's all water quality, that's all water factors affecting water quality, not
so in the last number of years the EPA have produced a share of maps to try and help understand what's affecting water quality. I suppose the important thing to think about water quality, people make, just because the water looks clear and clean doesn't mean that there's good water quality. It's about the ecosystem in the river and the ecology of the rivers, and they do a thing called kick testing every so often to decipher whether the water is in a pristine condition or in poor condition. So they produce these maps. The blue is really where you have phosphorus loss, and the yellow is nitrates. So you can see from the map the country is practically divided into the freer draining soils in the south and the east have a nitrogen issue, and the heavier soils have a phosphorus. Phosphorus usually moves across the surface of land in runoff, in weather events, and nitrogen gets carried in the water. Very soluble in water, down through good clay, free draining soil. So they break the pathways, the blue. The red then is ammonia losses from farmyards. They're testing the waters for ammonia, mainly from point source, grey water, and maybe some leakage from farmyards. The orange is the nitrates, and this is our last piece. The white flag then that's for other pressures, being the lie of the land, the topography of the land. Then if you want to have a look, I suppose what we're trying to encourage people to do, particularly within discussion groups and within their co-ops and groups, is to go into these maps yourself and see how you are in your own locality. So if you go into www.catchments.ie on the EPA site, you can put in your air code, and that's actually from my farm there in Dripsey. The circular thing is the actual farm itself, the air code, and you can see there that my farm is divided in two by different colours. The orange is showing a nitrogen risk, and on the other side it's still showing a nitrogen risk but less of a risk. And then we have what we call PIP maps, the pollution impact potential maps that the EPA have designed as well. You can keep on this tool and you can go to here. Now the problem with the PIP impact maps is that they're not that detailed, and they show there's a colour-coded system, and they show the biggest pressure in your area, but it's not that detailed, and you can't drill down into your own farm, whereas you can drill down on the nitrogen one. So look, we'd be encouraging people to try and get to know the different pressures in your area, get to know what the water quality is like in your local streams and your local catchment, your local estuary, your local river. And I suppose we do get a bit of people saying, well, there's no river near me, or there's no drains or blue waterways near me. That doesn't mean you don't have an impact on water quality. Nitrates primarily goes down through groundwater, and most in any free draining soil, the groundwater moves in vast quantities under the surface and ends up in the estuaries. So this is a slide that David Wall used a few weeks ago. It shows the imbalance across Europe, and if you can look across on the bottom, Ireland fares pretty well in this. We're somewhere there. I was looking. We're about 7th or 8th from the right, are we? And left, the right as we're looking at. So it shows the surplus of nitrogen from 2000 to 2003, and it shows the surplus from 12 to 15. So you can see that the surplus, the two bars show the different. The blue is the lower one, and the green, I suppose you call it, is the higher one. It shows we've reduced the surplus over the years, and it shows that we're in a very good place compared to other countries in the surplus. So I suppose overall, between the water quality parameters we have at the minute and between the surpluses we have, we're in quite a good place to make improvements here. So it's important that we move on and make these improvements and get farmer buy-in and get industry buy-in. And I think we have a lot of buy-in in the last 12 months. When we went down from 250 to 220, it has concentrated people's minds, it has raised the thing in the political platform, it has raised it at a processor level, and it has raised it at a farm level. And you see currently in the election, there's a lot of talk about it. The current Taoiseach has given commitments, the opposition party given commission. So with all this pressure coming in the last maybe 12 months, we pushed the department to have a plan. They published a plan in August, and I suppose what I would say first is that we're going to have more storage. Everybody acknowledges at this stage that we're short between 20-25% storage. There's a study coming in August to show that. The final results will be out in the spring, but it's pretty much known at this stage that our statutory requirement for storage is going to increase. So obviously that brings a big ask to farmers, a big financial ask for them to stay compliant at the current stocking limits. We have got a standalone TAMS system for grant aiding starting in January. 60% grant aided up to €90,000 for farmers. Now that's a substantial move forward. And the other thing we have achieved is we've got this planning exemption for manure storage that's supposed to come into legislation in the early spring. An exemption, it doesn't mean that you don't have to apply to the council. You still have to do your drawings and still have to get an engineer to submit your plans. It means that when you fit the criteria, you will be granted the permission to build a slurry store, and no one can object. So it will speed up the process. That's important. Between those two measures alone, we're suggesting that farmers should take advantage of it and raise your storage levels to make better use of your nutrients in the farm. We have a fertiliser register in this year. We have tightening artificial fertiliser regulations, and the reality here for farmers is if you don't make the best use possible of your nutrients on the farm, which is mainly slurry, you will be short nutrients to grow your crops and to grow grass for your livestock and grow silage. So we're suggesting that the slurry storage is a substantial asset to your farm, and in the longer term will be a financial benefit to your business. Additional funding for 50 ASAP advisors is the other thing in the plan. Very important that we get more funding for more advisors. We all see how stretched advisors are in the last number of years with a raft of different schemes and programs. So we need more funding for more advisors to get the message out there. We have a slurry importation scheme that was announced last year that's in play now at this stage. A farmer who takes in slurry from another farm, predominantly tillage farmers, they can apply for a slurry storage grant on their farm to construct I think that's the last one. I'm out of it.
John,
I suppose in a nutshell, if I wanted to sum up on these things, what I would say is that it's very important to give people confidence that we can achieve these things, and we've no chance of achieving if we don't get the majority of farmers to come with us on this journey. The big ask will be slurry storage into next year and in the next number of years. The state is backing up by substantially backing farmers to put it in place, so I would urge all farmers who need extra storage to take advantage of that.
John, the whole issue of the lack of certainty is a real one, you know, and if farmers aren't certain that they're going to have the derogation in 2026 to 2030, or even beyond that, will they put in the storage?
Look, what I would say is that, you know, the next National Action Plan is going to be agreed next maybe July, August, September, and taken to the Commission and taken to Europe for approval. I would say we're going to get approval for it. I would say that we're going to have more measures. We can't take the previous plan and expect to get approval, so we're going to have more measures. One of those substantial measures is more storage. We'll have more debate and more plans around nitrogen surpluses, and it probably will be more targeted. Everybody's talking about targeted. So I would say that we will hold on to the derogation. Certainty of the derogation is 4 years if we can get that, and next year is 5, so we have 5 years. But even on the slurry storage issue, that's probably the biggest ask of farmers, right? Are you going to put your money into slurry storage and risk having to go down in livestock numbers, we'll say, in 5 years' time? It is a risk, there's no doubt about that. We don't know whether The criteria for water quality has to improve. We don't know for certain is it going to improve. It is showing slight improvements when they're separating out agriculture from other things. But I would say to you that the slurry storage is a valuable asset to your farm. It's an asset to the state because you can more control of your destiny. The fertiliser register is tightening the regulation. Artificial fertilisers coming under more pressure. We have better ways of spreading slurry. The less spreading system has revolutionised the way we can get use of our slurries, and we can grow more material with it. We can put it out more judiciously at the time of year. So I would say yes, you should invest in the slurry storage. That'd be my take.
Corrigan, over New Zealand there's been a big play for as long as I've been looking at it in terms of nutrient surplus and looking at that, reducing that end balance. You've put software there that's calculating all those. We're moving that direction now, which is a positive. You know, okay, there might be some negativity towards it. It's kind of the first time we're now, John, we'll come to you on it, but we're looking at nutrient surpluses in a regulatory environment anyway. But is it improving water quality in New Zealand, do you think? What's the trend suggesting?
There's kind of a saying in New Zealand that it took a generation or more to get where we are, and it's going to take kind of the same thing to fix it, Aidan. So it's not a fast solution by any stretch, but the sense I get in New Zealand is that because we've taken the steps, we're doing the monitoring, we're more openly communicating the numbers, we're building public trust, and that was probably part of the key issue we had, was the sort of social licence. So that's on the improve. I think the other thing is, it's a little bit like the climate challenge that we're all up against as well. The more you can kind of break down your numbers and understand your system and understand the levers that you have, the more confidence, as you're referring to, John, that you have to kind of take control of your destiny. The process is probably, or the milk cooperative Fonterra for me is the one giving me the nutrient purchase surplus number. So I'm pretty familiar with that. And then the other thing I think there's a little bit of a difference between where we're at right now in New Zealand and here is that farmers and catchments have got together, formed voluntary catchment-led groups and are starting to try and tackle some of these problems together. And there's a strong, depending on your catchment group I suppose, but there's a strong recognition that every farm is different. And every farmer has got a slightly different set of values and objectives and history and relationship with their land, and that needs to be respected. So when you have an overall type top-down approach, it's very difficult to take a farmer and what they're trying to do into account. Flip it around the other way and give a catchment group a target, which let's say it's in loss reduction of 15% or something. You can start to work on that together, but you're each doing the things you want to do within your own farm. And that's
who's running that catchment group?
In our case, we're running it ourselves as a group of farmers. We've received funding, which is fantastic to help us with it. But we've also made commitments to achieve that, and then we're measured against those. We've got milestones we've got to hit. But ultimately, I guess your question is, it depends on what your farming system might be in New Zealand, but let's say it's an irrigated one, there's a good chance that you'll have an irrigation scheme that you're a member of, and they'll have a resource consent for the water. So if you don't meet the target, you lose your irrigation.
To extract water, which is a big, obviously that's going to be worth a lot. It's equivalent to irrigation, you could say here.
Very much.
On the measurement then, you brought up measurement. How, like John presented the data there, and where we can find our data and water quality, for me it's insufficient. You know, I want to know the numbers. I think John will agree with me, like we need better, whether the measurement needs to be better or not, definitely the communication around the measurement needs to be better. What's the situation like in your catchment? So you have that target to meet in your water quality in order to maintain your irrigation. What are you, where you find that information, and how frequent is it in terms of water quality?
The water quality itself, so that's being measured by a local unitary authority or local council, measuring it. We'd need an hour to answer that question for my catchment because it's highly complicated. But
do you know what it is? Do you know what direction you're going in?
Yes. The issue, and it's a dangerous one for us to bring up here, but there's an evolving science of water quality measurement. And one of the things that's hard for us in New Zealand is the further back you look, the shakier the data gets about where water quality used to be.
Okay.
And so we have exceptionally good water quality in my catchment, 0.4 parts per million nitrate. So it's pristine, clean, 72 metres of clarity in our water. And we're being held to that. But the reality is the tests over time have become more sensitive. So back in the day when it was supposedly cleaner, you could argue, was it? But that's the farming landscape in New Zealand.
Okay.
Yeah.
How about yourself in the Netherlands? Obviously, we discussed the derogation earlier on. What other regulations are coming down the line? We often hear of ammonia restrictions in terms of the buildings, where they're located.
Well, if you look at derogation, it's always been based on just nitrogen. And well, we're losing derogation, it's not coming back, so they will drop that road, I guess. And right now we got these action programs too for water quality, and they've got a wider perspective of fuel. It's not just nitrogen, it's phosphate. And there's some more minerals.
Just because you're going to lose the derogation doesn't mean the regulations will stop.
Agreed. It's European. It's not Dutch. It's European.
If fellas think if we don't have the derogation, we'll have less regulation. That's not the case. This thing is just going to keep moving on. We have frameworks coming in all the time and directives about water quality, air quality. Ammonia is a huge issue for us. So whether we maintain the derogation or not, it's not a solution. Just drop the derogation and we farm on.
But if you talk about just derogation, 90% of the farmland meets the limits in order to get derogation. From that point of view, it makes no sense losing it. There's other powers at play.
Yeah, but I suppose what I would say then as well is that we are not anywhere nearly intensely populated with production as Flanders and the Netherlands and parts of Germany is. So we are in a better place. We just need to manage the areas that are having difficulty better going forward.
Yeah, but keep in mind though, like New Zealand and Ireland are on their own. You're in Ireland, you know what goes in, you know what gets out. Holland, like we're the sewer of Europe.
Yeah.
Any main river from Europe ends up in Holland. The water crossing the German and Dutch border already doesn't meet the limits. So then us farmers are supposed to filter it.
Yeah. But is there a recognition then in, say, political circles or among your fellow farmers that Ireland is different?
Yeah.
And is there a recognition that we should have a derogation? Or is there a feeling now that we don't have one and we're losing ours, why should they have theirs? I know it's a difficult question for you to answer, but...
You'll be in the newspaper next week.
I'm sorry?
You'll be in the newspaper.
Sure.
Be careful what you say.
If I get it wrong, in the Irish way, you guys, you deserve derogation because you're grass-based, right? Cutting corners, yeah. Dutch way of looking at it, we deserve derogation because our efficiency is high. If you're in Eastern Europe, you don't have derogation, you will never get it. From that point of view, screw us.
Yeah. Neither of us deserve.
75% of Europe doesn't want us to have derogation. Besides the whole nutrient discussion, it's just an economical discussion too.
And is that really, John, at Brussels level, or is it just on water quality?
I've been told that if you get it past the nitrogen, there's a nitrates committee, and then you must get it past the nitrates committee, then past the environmental committee, and if you get it past those two stages, that member states usually don't give trouble. They will grant it. I mean, in all walks of life within the community, there is derogations on a raft of different things.
Yeah.
And it gives competitive advantages to a fella selling chairs or cars or stereos, whatever it is. And there's PGI status for different things. So it has loads of precedent. It's billed as an economic advantage to us, but we have lots of other disadvantages in our cost base. Like we've seen analysis where the grass is the only competitive advantage we have. All our costs are high relative to Europe. Energy, feed costs, labour, the cost of doing business. So if we lose the advantage in our grass-based system, we are seriously put at a disadvantage to the rest of Europe. So it's not an argument not to get the derogation.
Yeah.
The argument is if we meet the criteria, the Commission have a criteria about improving water quality, that is going to be difficult to achieve, because we already heard here about, you know, it can take a generation to change water quality. We all understand that this thing is going to take time, and we had probably a few lost years previously. We need time to get this thing over the line. In the longer term, it will improve, but it's a question of time.
Yeah, but you're skipping the political game.
Well,
you're right, but
we have a lot of political will in the country now as well to get it over the line, like, so that's a big help for us. So we have a commitment from the Taoiseach the last day that he's going to set up a subcommittee in the cabinet chaired by himself. We have all the other parties rowing in behind it. We have the industry seriously engaged about it.
We had 2 years ago, you know, the Nitrate Committee in Brussels. We had 4 Dutch ministers going there.
But your figures are shocking on that.
But they did it. There was 4 ministers going there. The one responsible for building, the one responsible for Schiphol, you name it. They didn't tell the agriculture minister they were going.
Yeah, well, I suppose, look, if I was to put it politely, like, we're in a better place than you are, for certain. So it's not at the scale or not at the magnitude of where you're at with it. Like, the nearest example to us of being in a very difficult position is Northern Ireland. Northern Ireland have a very difficult balance because they've imported a whole heap of agriculture into the 6 counties in the last 20 years, and with it comes a whole heap of feed. And they have serious water trouble now. We don't have anything like that. Like. So what I'm saying is that when we get a bit of time and we get farmer buy-in and the thing moves on, because people are becoming exercised about it, people are buying into it. Like.
Yeah.
It is getting through the message. Like. So if we have a normal year next year, hopefully, and not reasonably normal year, good prices and stuff, a bit of confidence in the industry, this thing could move on a lot quicker than people think. And you know, farming at 220, while I accept it was difficult for some fellas to come back from 250 to 220, sometimes like pushing it to the very limit mightn't be the best thing for your business. And in difficult years, it can be very stressful to manage, very difficult financially, and maybe coming back a small bit isn't the worst result. But we need to keep it where it is now going forward.
Moving on to chemical nitrogen or synthetic nitrogen rates, you reduced it in New Zealand, Corrigan. Was there a limit before? Or
no, there wasn't a limit. The limit's now 190 kgs of
which is quite low now compared to what some of the farmers in Canterbury or other regions would have been applying. How has that worked? So you've a couple of years into that now. Is it still
I think the general sense is that probably we weren't as efficient with nitrogen as, and that's like all things in life, isn't it? If there's no limit, you just, you know. So I don't think there's less feed necessarily being grown in New Zealand as a result of that, but the way we use nitrogen is a whole lot more purposeful than it probably was. Yeah.
Alco, in Netherlands, which is irrigation goals, what will be your maximum allowable synthetic nitrogen? Chemical.
We're allowed to put, well, it kind of depends on your soil type, your crop type, grazing, non-grazing. In our situation, with grazing, we're allowed to put a total of 325.
Organic plus artificial.
Organic plus artificial.
Yeah, that's low.
Well, if you say organic, that was with derogation 250. Efficiency 45%, let's say 125. So you were allowed to put another 200
of chemical on.
Of chemical.
Yeah. So now with the slurry, with the manure leaving your farm, are you going to have enough nutrients available?
Well, I think nitrogen isn't the biggest issue. We can cope with it. Seed more clover. What doesn't feel good to me is it's not just nitrogen you're exporting with your manure. You got a whole package of minerals and nutrients. You can't replace that with fertilizer.
Yeah, I suppose just to talk about the limit here for us, it's going down by 5% next year. It was meant to go down this year, but that plan didn't get over the line quick enough. They looked for a 10% reduction when the consultants came back to recommend it. So there was a discussion about that. So there was an agreement that we would stick to the 5% and that we would take on a pilot basis nutrient or nitrogen surplus and nitrogen use efficiency figures at farm level. So I suppose where this is going is that individual farmers are going to own their own figures going forward. Now that's going to take a huge job of work because we need advisors on the ground, we need farmers to get into it, and there will be a surplus for your type of farming, for your stocking rate, for not the type of land yet that's goes in catchment, and there'll be an urgent use efficiency figure. So the trade-off for blanket reductions, which can be very harmful to the industry, with no guarantee that they will work, the trade-off now is going to be more targeted initiatives and more the farmers owning their own figures. Now there is inherent dangers in that for some farmers, because you might be farming in a very vulnerable, sensitive zone, and then there might be gains for other farmers who are not farming in those areas. But I suppose the most important thing is that as many farmers as possible buy into it, because this isn't just about derogation farmers. Like, this is about all livestock farmers and all pig farmers, tillage farmers and poultry farmers. This is about everybody buying into this thing. And like the regulations that we have with us, some of those regulations have been there for quite a long number of years. The issue is they weren't really implemented, or they weren't really implemented robustly enough. And now they're going to be implemented more robustly, so therefore there's an adjustment period for farmers to get involved, to get used to it. But if you're doing your job reasonably correct, I would say that there's nothing to fear from these regulations. A lot of them are common sense. A lot of them make a lot of sense to your business. They can save you money in the longer term. I spoke about using your slurry properly, reducing the overall risk that your business poses to the environment. That doesn't mean that you're going to have blips like the weather we had in the last year. There's nothing you can do about that. You can only control the controllables, but definitely by taking mitigating action, it's like having enough silage in your pit to mitigate the bad weather. Yeah. It's the same principle, lads. You've got to try and get it in your head that we've got to reduce risks here and we've got to take our chances. When you're talking about managing your slurry, you should treat it like cutting your silage or milking your cows. It's a very important task, and it should be done in a timely fashion. And when you get windows of opportunity with weather and growths and stuff, you have to take them. The gear is in the country. We never had so much gear in the country with contractors and farmers. So there's no reason why you just can't have your slurry tanks full in the middle of August. Like, you should only be spreading the